Market Mantra. Market Mantra. Market Mantra. Market Mantra. Market Mantra. Market Mantra.
Good evening, listeners, and welcome to this edition of Market Mantra, in which we give you a complete update on the economic, business and stock market news of the day. I am S. Rangabashyam, and with me is my co-anchor in Hindi, Vishal Sharma.
नमस्कार, मार्केट मंत्र में आप सभी का स्वागत। आधे घंटे के इस कार्यक्रम में लाएंगे आप तक देश और दुनिया से आर्थिक, व्यापारिक और शेयर बाजार के ताजा समाचार, साथ ही उन पर चर्चा भी करेंगे। चर्चा के लिए आज स्टूडियो में आमंत्रित हैं आर्थिक विशेषज्ञ उद्यन रे। उद्यन जी, नमस्कार, कार्यक्रम में आपका स्वागत।
धन्यवाद।
और सबसे पहले हेडलाइंस के साथ हैं एस रंगभाष्यम।
Thank you, Vishal. The top stories. Domestic stocks witnessed gains of more than 0.5% amid positive global cues. Sensex finishes above 62,500 mark, while Nifty settles above 18,600 level. Gold climbs above 54,300 rupees per 10 grams for February contract at MCX. And Brent crude rises to $78.60 per barrel.
सकारात्मक वैश्विक संकेतों के बीच घरेलू शेयर बाजारों में 0.5% से अधिक की तेजी। सेंसेक्स 62,500 के निशान से ऊपर हुआ बंद। निफ्टी 18,600 के स्तर से ऊपर पहुंचा। एमसीएक्स पर फरवरी अनुबंध के सोने का वायदा भाव बढ़कर 54,300 रुपए प्रति 10 ग्राम से ऊपर, और ब्रेंट कच्चे तेल के दाम बढ़कर हुए $78.60 प्रति बैरल। कार्यक्रम में बात सबसे पहले शेयर बाजार की। प्रमुख घरेलू शेयर बाजारों में आज 0.5% से अधिक की तेजी रही। वैश्विक शेयर बाजारों से मिले सकारात्मक संकेतों के बीच सेंसेक्स 62,500 के निशान से ऊपर, जबकि निफ्टी 18,600 के स्तर से ऊपर बंद हुए। बॉम्बे स्टॉक एक्सचेंज का सेंसेक्स 403 अंक के उछाल से 62,533 पर बंद हुआ। नेशनल स्टॉक एक्सचेंज का निफ्टी भी 111 अंक बढ़कर 18,608 पर पहुंच गया। व्यापक बाजार की बात करें तो बीएसई मिड कैप इंडेक्स 0.25% और स्मॉल कैप इंडेक्स 0.4% की बढ़त में रहे।
Well, as Vishal just mentioned, the Sensex and the Nifty today witnessed gains of more than 0.5%, and both indices rose amid positive cues from the global stock markets. The BSE Sensex closed above the 62,500 mark, while the Nifty settled above 18,600 level. The Sensex climbed 403 points to close at 62,533. While the Nifty also gained 111 points to close at 18,608. In the broader market at the BSE, mid-cap index rose 0.25%, while the small-cap index ended 0.40% up. In the Sensex pack, 24 companies posted gains, while 6 logged losses. IndusInd Bank was the top gainer, as it added 2.5%, followed by Bajaj Finance, which surged 1.8%. Infosys rose 1.7%, while HCL Tech added 1.6%. On the other hand, Nestle India declined 0.6% and Tata Steel slipped 0.5%. Maruti fell 0.4% and Titan ended 0.3% down. In sectoral indices at the BSE, 13 sectors gained while 7 logged losses. Telecom sector gained 1.5%, while the tech index rose 1.3%. IT sector surged 1.1% and financial services index added 0.7%. On the other hand, realty sector plunged 0.8%. Oil and gas and consumer durables, both indices fell 0.2% each. Metal sector slipped 0.1%. The overall breadth of the BSE trade was positive, as shares of 1,902 companies gained, while 1,605 fell. Shares of 144 companies, however, remained unchanged. Udayan, to talk about the stock markets, it seems this certain amount of resilience in the stock markets, and especially if you see the Sensex is almost at an a lifetime peak, although it touched the 63,000 mark as well. But from there, it hasn't come down much. It is in that region. What do you think are the basic factors for this kind of a strength and resilience?
Ranga, one of the things is, of course, the inflation figure. Immediately if you want to look at it. So the inflation figure has turned out to be far more benign than what was being expected. For the first time in so many months, it's come below that 6%
mark.
Lakshman Rekha. So that does give you a little bit of good spirits. Although as experts have pointed out, the core inflation remains quite stubborn. So we are not out of the woods. It's not. It's sticky, it's obdurate. So that's number one. Of course, the other thing that it indicates is this whole rate hike business that was going on. It clearly now looks as if in the next couple of months, the rate hikes might be there, maybe a hike or two, but the quantum is going to become lesser.
Okay.
That's what people are expecting, and at some point maybe there'll be a pause
instead of a hike.
Instead of a hike, and simply because you also had these numbers from IIP which are not exactly flattering as far as consumer goods and consumer durables.
Yes.
So those are obviously giving you optimism. Then, of course, if you look at individual sectors, IT stocks I think have done well today.
Yeah.
Even some of the banking stocks, PSU banks. So people are looking at those opportunities and looking at where they would put. Then of course Reliance. So all these things are adding up. And then of course if you look at it from a global standpoint, as it's now people have been repeating it ad nauseum, that we will continue to look attractive. But of course, Ranga, to wrap this answer up, the markets are going to obviously look at the data that's going to come out from the US as far as their inflation is concerned.
Yeah.
And of course, what is the kind of decision and commentary that's going to come out of the US Federal Reserve meeting tomorrow.
Right. Yeah. Well, then you spoke about the interest rates, even the latest one, 35 basis points hike. But as experts always point out, it takes a lag period of say 4 to 6 weeks for that to percolate down. So even with the latest hike of 35 basis points, it is still some 1.5 2 months down the line where we'll be able to see the actual impact, isn't it?
Absolutely, and that's what in the last time I was here. About 2 weeks back in this program, I did mention that typically it takes about 6 to 9 months. To really get a sense of it. So what you are probably starting to see, that's the suspicion. We can't establish it at the moment. That rate hike impact, you're beginning to now see it in certain areas. So you're just seeing that compression of margins, pass through to customers, all these things you're beginning to now see it, and it is inevitable, and that's what you want to do because the system is getting overheated. You want to cool things down, but you don't want to slow things down so much that you can't go on to the next move on to a higher gear. So these things you cannot do it with a finely calibrated. You can't do it because economy is too big. What kind of signals come in, and you're a globalized economy. You're also depend on many other powerful forces. So, but this lag happens. The good part for us is that our rate hike cycle, and that's my personal opinion, of course. It seems to be, it probably will slow down the quantum, and in terms of hike, looks like it will slow down much before US.
Okay.
And many of the other countries, simply because we have entered that zone. Unless things again go south, which is not typically, Ranga, what also happens is if you've seen year after year, things like vegetable prices, which have moderated, they typically tend to moderate around this time. The other thing is, of course, we had this problem of base effect. So that is also going away. So all these things, roughly somehow are working in our favor. It's a little bit of a mixed bag, but we'll take them because we had a rough 2 years, and we'll take all the pluses that we get.
जी, उदयन, शेयर बाजार की बात करें तो आज हम अगर सेक्टर स्पेसिफिक देखें तो टेलीकॉम सेक्टर में 1.5% की आज तेजी रही है। इस तेजी के पीछे आप क्या वजह देखते हैं, और क्या हम ये मान के चलें कि जो टेलीकॉम सेक्टर ने पिछले कुछ समय में एक बुरा दौर देखा, अब उससे वो बाहर आ चुका है?
देखिए, टेलीकॉम सेक्टर में कोशिश तो की जा रही है। अगर आप रेवेन्यू पर यूजर देखें तो वहां पे बढ़ोतरी तो हो रही है, और जब जैसे जैसे आपका डेटा वैल्यू एडेड सर्विस आप देते रहेंगे, जहाँ पर डेटा का दूसरा उपयोग होगा, मान लीजिए 5G आप आगे चल के उपलब्ध कराते हैं और लोग उसको इस्तेमाल करते हैं, जो कि करेंगे, कमर्शियली भी होगा और कंज्यूमर्स उपभोक्ता भी करेंगे रिटेल का, तो वहां पे आपके रियलाइजेशन बेहतर होगा। आप सोचिए ना, पहले हम लोग सिर्फ वॉइस कॉल्स करते थे, उससे थोड़ी ना कमाई होती है। आप जितना उसको वैल्यू एडेड सर्विस, आप कॉमर्स करेंगे, ट्रांजैक्शन करेंगे, जितना वक्त लेंगे वहां पे और वहां से इस्तेमाल करेंगे, आपको आपका जो कमाई होगी कंपनी से वो बेहतर होगी। दूसरी बात ये भी है विशाल की प्रोग्रेसिव जो ऑप्शंस हुए थे बैंडविड्थ जो भी कहिए, उसमें कंपनीज ने डेट बहुत लिया था, लोन्स बहुत लिए थे, उसका भार बहुत पड़ा हुआ था। वो धीरे 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 करके वो भार का इंतजाम किया जा रहा है, मतलब उसको उसमें कमी या उसको मैनेज किया जा रहा है। आपने वोडा का देखा, एयरटेल का देखा, सब उस भार के नीचे दबे हुए थे। तो वो कुछ जो है ओवर अ पीरियड ऑफ टाइम वो सॉर्ट आउट होगा, पर वो भार इतना ज्यादा है कि वो एक रातों रात तो गायब नहीं होगा, पर उसमें समाधान की तरफ आगे बढ़ रहा है।
तो क्या ये सारा भार जो है, जो आप कह रहे हैं, ये क्या उपभोक्ता की तरफ शिफ्ट होगा?
देखिए, उपभोक्ता की तरफ वो इवेंचुअली किसी न किसी तरीके से चाहता है। अगर कंपनी अगर होंगी, आपकी मुट्ठी भर कंपनी होंगी या मुट्ठी से तो कम ही है यहाँ पे, तो फिर वो कौन करेगा? या तो शेयर होल्डर करें, शेयर होल्डर कर नहीं पा रहे, बैंक कर नहीं सकता, तो आपको मिला जुला असर चारों तरफ ही होता है। यहाँ तो सरकार भी आ गई है, तो बट ये इतना स्ट्रेटेजिकली इंपॉर्टेंट सेक्टर है और हमारे लिए इतना इंपॉर्टेंट है, हमारे सर्विसेज हैं, हम जो फाइनेंशियल इंक्लूजन है, जहाँ पे जो सेवाएं हैं, जो हमें
मोबाइल,
हाँ, बिल्कुल नीचे के तबके तक हम जा रहे हैं। बेनिफिट ट्रांसफर, जो भी आप करना चाहते हैं, आपकी जो भी आकांक्षाएं हैं, जो आपका एम्बिशंस हैं, वो अगर आप करना चाहते हैं तो आपका ये मोबाइल के थ्रू ही डिलीवर होगी। और हमारा वो बैकबोन बन चुका है, वो हमारा बेनिफिट है, और उसी के ऊपर अब हमने वो जो मेहनत की थी उसी का फल अब हमें मिलना शुरू हो रहा है, और तो मिलता चला जाएगा। तो ये स्ट्रेटेजिक सेक्टर है, तो यहाँ पे तो आप कोई कॉम्प्रोमाइज कर नहीं सकते। तो अच्छा होता अगर ये इसका जो ट्रैजेक्टरी है वो दूसरी तरह से निकलता, पर अगर जो है वो ठीक है, आपका जो डेवलपमेंट रह गए, पीछे रह गए, आप उसको आगे हमें बढ़ना है।
Yeah. Well, then we are talking about the telecom sector. If you were to do a kind of a mini review of the entire sector, a couple of years back, there were almost, 8, 9, 10 players in a circle. And from there on, we have seen huge amount of consolidation. Now we are left with, maybe just 3 big players in the entire segment. Do you think the market, telecom market in the country has actually matured? And from an oligopolistic market, we are probably, moving towards what experts call as duopoly, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, that's far, Ranga, that's actually far better than monopolistic. There's some countries you go, there's only one provider. So it's far better than that. Yeah, it will be much nicer if quality of consumer service, we need not get into great details on rant about certain aspects of the services. But obviously that needs to improve by leaps and bounds. But it's also true, Ranga, the price at which we get data in our country, it's amazingly low. Mm-hmm. And that allows us to do all kinds of things, including the daily morning good mornings that come on messaging. Yeah, so which brings down the whole system globally. So it's amazing what we have been able to do, and it's actually a global case study that has happened. It's a great thing. The reason why even three companies are being able, three or whatever you would want to say players, good players are there, is because we have so many consumers.
Yeah.
If it had been 1/3, it would have been just a player.
Yes.
So it's actually a good thing. And of course there are going to be lots of other things coming up as we get into higher speeds and more capable and empowered hardware.
Right. Well, listeners, you are tuned in to Market Mantra on All India Radio. It's time now for a quick commercial break.
अपने बिजनेस को बढ़ाने के लिए लीजिए आकाशवाणी का सहयोग और दीजिए उसे बुलंदियों के पंख।
आपका बिजनेस लोकल है या राष्ट्रीय, आकाशवाणी देती है उपभोक्ताओं तक पहुंचने का हर विकल्प।
और अब तो आप घर, दफ्तर या दुकान पर बैठे बैठे कर सकते हैं आकाशवाणी के किसी भी केंद्र के लिए विज्ञापनों की बुकिंग।
आकाशवाणी के विभिन्न चैनलों पर विज्ञापन देना सुलभ और सस्ता।
बुकिंग है तो संपर्क करें 8700014242 पर।
8700014242।
कार्यक्रम मार्केट मंत्र में आप सभी का एक बार फिर स्वागत। हम चर्चा कर रहे थे शेयर बाजार के बारे में। उद्यन, जो सोसाइटी ऑफ इंडियन ऑटोमोबाइल मैन्युफैक्चरर्स सियाम की जो रिपोर्ट आई है नवंबर के, जो उसने 2022 की सेल्स रिपोर्ट जो जारी की है, वो ये बता रही हैं कि पैसेंजर व्हीकल की बिक्री 28% बढ़ी है नवंबर में और टू व्हीलर्स की बिक्री में भी 16% की ग्रोथ देखने को मिली है। आने वाले वक्त में ऑटोमोबाइल सेक्टर में आप किस तरीके की तेजी की उम्मीद कर रहे हैं?
विशाल, ये देखना पड़ेगा कि देखिए वो तो त्योहारों का वक्त है जहां पे खरीदारी अमूमन बढ़ती है, तो अब ये देखना है कि क्या ये बरकरार रहेगी। दूसरा ये है कि ये तो हमें जब तक हम जनवरी फरवरी तक नहीं आते, क्योंकि नए साल में नए मॉडल्स खरीदने के लिए कुछ लोग वेट भी कर जाते हैं। तो अगर बरकरार रहता है फिर तो बहुत ही अच्छी बात है। और ये भी दर्शाएगा कि एक जो इनपुट प्रॉब्लम आ रही थी कई पार्ट्स की और सप्लाई चेन से जुड़ी हुई बातें, वो भी
सेमीकंडक्टर,
यस एब्सोल्युटली, तो वो ये लगेगा कि वो सुलझता हुआ नजर
कुछ हद तक
नजर आएगा। तो ये तो अपनी जगह है और ये आपको ये भी इंडिकेट करेगा कि ये आपका जो डिमांड है वो स्ट्रांग है, क्योंकि आप अगर गाड़ियां लेते हैं तो काफी लोग जो है गाड़ियां लोन पे लेते हैं। तो अगर लोन आप तभी लेंगे जब आपके अपने आय के बारे में आपको कॉन्फिडेंस है, आपको मालूम है वो निश्चित आय बनी रहेगी और आपकी शायद आय में वृद्धि होगी, तभी आप लोन ले रहे हैं। तो क्योंकि आप फ्यूचर इनकम जो है उसको आप पिक्चर में ला रहे हैं, तो ये काफी कुछ इंडिकेट करता है। और ऑटो के साथ जुड़े हुए हम जानते हैं भरे हुए और उद्योग हैं, टीयर 1, टीयर 2, टीयर 3 एंसिलरीज है, इंजीनियरिंग उद्योग हैं, मशीन टूल्स हैं। तो वो सिर्फ वो एक सेक्टर ही नहीं है, वो अपने साथ बहुत कुछ लेके जाती है। उसके साथ निर्यात भी है, तो कई जगह हम निर्यात भी करते हैं हमारे यहाँ से, तो ये काफी कुछ इकट्ठा दिखाएगी। पर मुझे लगता है कि आगे चल के आपको कुछ मिक्स्ड सा पिक्चर आएगा। ये मानना कि बिल्कुल रनअवे ग्रोथ होगा वो शायद आपको ना दिखे, पर हाँ एक स्टेडी ग्रोथ, अगर इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ अगर जितना भी आप सोच रहे हैं अगर वो आप उसकी उम्मीद कर रहे हैं, उसके लिए ऑटो सेक्टर, बैंकिंग सेक्टर का एक सर्टेन ग्रोथ होना तो जरूरी है, नहीं तो वो कहाँ से आएगा। तो ये अगर हम कुछ परसेंटेज मान के चलते हैं कि आर्थिक वृद्धि का दर होगा, तो फिर ऑटो सेक्टर का एक पर्टिकुलर ग्रोथ और बैंकिंग एंड फाइनेंशियल सर्विसेज सेक्टर का भी सर्टेन ग्रोथ होना बहुत जरूरी है। तो ये तो मान के चल ही सकते हैं, बस सवाल है कि क्या उससे हम सेटिस्फाइड होंगे, क्या वो हमारी अपेक्षा के अनुसार होगा, तो ये देखना बाकी है।
But then we are talking about the auto sector. Let's also quickly, discuss the EV segment. Consistently, there have been news for the last 5-6 months. The registrations have been more than 1 lakh, which includes all 2-wheelers, 3-wheelers, and passenger cars, and a small minuscule of commercial buses also. So isn't that a good news for the entire segment? And probably the first mover advantage will go to 1 or 2 auto companies who have certain commercially viable, EV models.
Yeah, I'm not very sure about the first mover advantage, because this is a game-changing aspect of transportation, or shall we say mobility. So that's number one. Number two is, yes, of course, it's a very important thing, but the amount of infrastructure and the amount of production capability, other things, they also become extremely important. So that getting overhauled in our country, for that matter, any country, had we been in any other country, maybe a Western country with far lesser people and much higher income, there also it's going to be a challenge. It's not going to be
You're indicating at infrastructure like charging facilities,
absolutely,
battery issues,
yes.
like lithium-ion batteries.
Absolutely, and there's no doubt we are going to be moving at a breakneck speed, and if we crack it, then we are going to take many other countries with us, because we're going to be supplying to them. Sure. Because whatever we are going to supply, we're going to supply, do it very, very smartly. So yes, that's going to be there, and it's going to be very exciting. But to see it altered, something really smart, some really great entrepreneurial initiative has to be there, where it will just alter the landscape in a very short time. So can that happen? Obviously that can happen, but the question is, it needs a little bit of a genius. Otherwise, the transformation will be there, but it will take years, if not, it's not going to happen at the snap of a finger. That's my sense.
That's right. Well, let's move on now to the banking sector. Public sector banks have recovered more than 1,03,000 crore rupees in written-off loans during the last 5 financial years. This was stated by Minister of State for Finance, Dr. Bhagwat Karad, in a written reply in Rajya Sabha today. He informed that borrowers of written-off loans continue to be liable for repayment, and the process of recovery of dues from the borrower in written-off loan accounts continues. He said banks continue to pursue recovery action initiated in written-off accounts through various available recovery mechanisms. Udayan, surely, even though in the balance sheet it might be written off as NPA, but the banks keep on pursuing. But don't you think the focus should be more on the big fish rather than going after the small fish?
Well, rules are rules, actually. Yes, you should do that, because then there's a signaling effect. Yeah. If you do that, then you are sending a signal that nobody's above the law or the rules, and that actually it has a good signaling effect. But ideally, Ranga, there should be a deterrent. I mean, okay. And one also has to be fair. Sometimes what happens is, if it's a genuine business related, because in a growing economy and dramatically changing economic conditions, the kind of conditions we've gone through in the past 2 years, one has to also distinguish between a business condition mishap versus an intentional, malified intention of not repaying. So that distinction has to be there, and I'm sure it's being made, and maybe things will get better as we experience it. And the larger part, Ranga, I thought I will express and share is that as a country we have also learned how do you deal with this. We never went through this kind of a process. Now we are much wiser, we have understood things. There are frameworks out there, so which can solve these things. And basically, when the money of the bank is getting stuck, how it should be recovered, what are the legal mechanisms. So I think we are far better, and that's actually translating into the numbers for the banks. Today, you would be far more confident about a bank's financial statements and feel slightly better than I'm sure what it was like 3 years back. So it's getting better, and that actually is getting, my sense is that's getting reflected in the stock prices as well.
जी, अब रुख करते हैं वैश्विक शेयर बाजारों का। दुनिया के अधिकतर शेयर बाजारों में आज तेजी का रुख रहा। एशियाई शेयर बाजारों की बात करें तो चीन के शंघाई कंपोजिट इंडेक्स को छोड़कर सभी एशियाई शेयर बाजार आज बढ़त के साथ बंद हुए। सिंगापुर के स्ट्रेट्स टाइम्स इंडेक्स में 1% का उछाल आया। हांगकांग का हैंगसेंग 0.7% और जापान का निकेई 0.4% लाभ में रहे। हालांकि चीन के शंघाई कंपोजिट इंडेक्स में 0.1% की गिरावट रही, जबकि दक्षिण कोरिया का कोस्पी बिना किसी उतार चढ़ाव के सपाट बंद हुआ। यूरोपीय शेयर बाजारों की बात करें तो अंतर्देशीय कारोबार में यहां भी तेजी का रुख था। जर्मनी का डेक्स 0.8% लाभ में चल रहा था। फ्रांस का कैक 0.7% और लंदन का FTSE 100 0.5% की बढ़त के साथ कारोबार कर रहे थे।
And after Asian and European markets, let's take a look at the American markets as well. Wall Street stocks and US Treasury yields rose yesterday as investors took an optimistic stance ahead of the last round of US and major European central banks meeting regarding interest rate hikes this year. Investors hope that the pace of increases in borrowing costs will be slower. The Dow Jones Industrial Average gained 1.4%, the S&P 500 rose 1.6%, and the Nasdaq Composite added 1.3%. Udin, to talk about the global markets as such, despite having said about all the problems and issues related to global markets, it is kind of status quo. We have seen the Russia-Ukraine conflict. It is kind of simmering. And, inflation issues are always been there. And, some slowdown in growth. We can't call it a recession, but obviously some slowdown in global economy as such. But more or less, it is kind of a, status quo, isn't it? No bad news, no bigger bad news as such.
Yes, I guess one can call it nasty surprise. You're not getting those nasty bad headlines. Yeah. Headlines that will not...
COVID at one point in time.
Yes. And the headlines, there are no headlines that are actually not making you feel good. I mean, we are talking from the studios in New Delhi. I'm sure things would be fairly different in Europe, where it's getting cold and energy prices are so high, it's ridiculously high. So yeah, that's true. And actually, December has turned out to be far more calm than what I thought, with all the oil price setting, etc., by some countries and all that mayhem. It seems that the markets have digested things reasonably well. The headlines are not as bad as we would have some people
feared.
Would have, and maybe that's a relief. That relief is showing up in stock market sentiments as well. People are not talking about really gloomy things. Despite all the apprehensions, you're not getting bad numbers in terms of unemployment in the US and some other places. In our country also, stock markets are doing pretty well, very well in fact. So we are getting good numbers. There are, of course, spots of worry. We talked about some less than assuring IIP numbers. Then, of course, the export numbers are also disconcerting, simply because it's reflecting the kind of impact some of these countries in the West are going through. Right. So in that sense, it's a mixed bag, but we'll take it, as I said, because we've had a rough 2 years during the pandemic, and we'll take all. I think we deserve it.
Yeah. You spoke about oil. Let's take a look at the oil scenario as well. Oil today extended gains on supply disruptions and ease in COVID restrictions in China. The crude prices rose around 1%. In intraday trade, Brent crude was trading at $78.60 per barrel, while WTI crude were at $73.50 per barrel.
बात कीमती धातुओं की करें तो मल्टी कमोडिटी एक्सचेंज पर फरवरी अनुबंध के सोने का वायदा मूल्य आज 200 रुपए की तेजी से 54,330 रुपए प्रति 10 ग्राम पर चल रहा था। मार्च अनुबंध वाली चांदी भी 490 रुपए की मजबूती से 68,275 रुपए प्रति किलोग्राम के स्तर पर कारोबार कर रही थी। उधर न्यूयॉर्क मर्केंटाइल एक्सचेंज में सोना बढ़त के साथ $1,797.50 प्रति औंस और चांदी $23.70 प्रति औंस पर कारोबार कर रही थी। उद्यम बहुत संक्षेप में जानना चाहेंगे, सोना लगभग 55,000 की तरफ बढ़ता दिख रहा है। ये तेजी आगे भी जारी रहने वाली है या ये इसका कोई कारण है, आप देखते हैं?
देखिए, अंतर्राष्ट्रीय मार्केट में फेडरल रिजर्व के निर्णय का, मीटिंग के रिजल्ट का इंतजार किया जा रहा है।
जी उद्यन, आप कार्यक्रम में शामिल हुए और इतनी उपयोगी चर्चा की, इसके लिए आपका बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
धन्यवाद विशाल।
And before we close, a quick look at the top stories. Domestic stocks witnessed gains of more than 0.5% amid positive global cues. Sensex closes above 62,500 mark, while the Nifty settles above 18,600 level. Gold climbs to 54,300 rupees per 10 grams for February contracts at the MCX, and Brent crude rises to $78.60 per barrel.
सकारात्मक वैश्विक संकेतों के बीच घरेलू शेयर बाजारों में आधा प्रतिशत से अधिक की तेजी। सेंसेक्स 62,500 के निशान से ऊपर हुआ बंद। निफ्टी 18,600 के स्तर से ऊपर पहुंचा। एमसीएक्स पर फरवरी अनुबंध के सोने का वायदा भाव बढ़कर 54,300 रुपए प्रति 10 ग्राम से ऊपर और ब्रेंट कच्चे तेल के दाम बढ़कर हुए $78.60 प्रति बैरल।
That's it in this edition of Market Mantra. Thank you so much for joining us. Goodbye.
नमस्कार।
Market Mantra. Market Mantra.